The CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki, is stepping down. So my question is, what the hell is going to happen next? Susan tweeted, "Today, after nearly 25 years at Google, I'm stepping back to start a new chapter. I'm inspired every day by creators around the world who bring together people on YouTube. It's been an honor to have a front row seat to this incredible community." A lot of people know Susan as the CEO of YouTube, and there's one infamous screenshot of her that goes around a lot, but I think a lot of people don't know much beyond that. One really interesting thing about Google is that it was started in a garage in 1998 by these two guys, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And here's some pictures of that garage that they started Google in. What a lot of people don't know is that this was Susan Wojcicki's garage. So the two guys that started Google started it in Susan's garage. She let them use the space. So she goes way back to the founding of Google. And it's been pretty interesting to see the range of reactions to her resignation. Like this tweet from Internet J, who said, "Thank God, under her reign, there is zero transparency to creators. We get demonetized randomly, can't talk to a human to appeal, etc. Every video I upload for the past 2 years had 10 copies of the same video uploaded 10 times because some got randomly demonetized while others didn't." And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have YouTuber Emp Lemon saying, "I gave Susan a lot of flack back in the day, but I must admit that YouTube has been generally well run over the past few years. Revenue and growth has been good, lots of the problems I once complained about have been improved, and small channels still have decent opportunity to grow. I can't say I'm happy to see her go at this point. Despite the rough patches, she ended up steering YouTube to a very stable place. Now that's all up in the air again. I sincerely hope her successor is not a massive douche, as so many Silicon Valley people tend to be." And I think Emp Lemon brings up a great point here, because that was the first thing that came to my mind too. What if the new person is completely out of touch and like unhinged? So I started doing a little digging on the new CEO of YouTube, Neil Mohan. Now, one of the first bits of information I read about Neil was from Susan's letter that she wrote and sent out to creators and YouTube staff before she left. She said, "Today, after nearly 25 years here, I've decided to step back from my role as the head of YouTube and start a new chapter focused on my family, health, and personal projects I'm passionate about. The time is right for me, and I feel able to do this because we have an incredible leadership team in place at YouTube. When I joined YouTube 9 years ago, one of my first priorities was bringing in an incredible leadership team. Neil Mohan was one of those leaders, and he'll be the SVP and new head of YouTube. I've spent nearly 15 years of my career working with Neil, first when he came over to Google with DoubleClick acquisition in 2007, and his role grew to become SVP of display and video ads. He became YouTube's chief product officer in 2015. Since then, he has set up a top-notch product and UX team, played pivotal roles in the launch of some of our biggest products, including YouTube TV, YouTube Music, and Premium and Shorts, and has led our trust and safety team, ensuring that YouTube lives up to its responsibility as a global platform. He has a wonderful sense for our product, our business, our creator and user communities, and our employees. Neil will be a terrific leader for YouTube." So that's always good to hear. You know, of course, the CEO leaving, as long as they're leaving on good terms, they're going to say something nice about the next person, but it's still nice to hear it. It's still nice to read it. So then I started to wonder what people think about Neil who aren't the CEO of YouTube and who aren't writing a nice PR letter for people. As nice as this is, what do people who have worked with him think of him? What has he worked on before? What has he done? And how does he think about YouTube? And so I found a pretty interesting article that my friend actually sent me. So let's take a look at that. So the title of this article from Insider is "Google Paid This Man $100 Million. Here's His Story." And this is from 2013. So this is a decade old, and they had already paid him $100 million. I can't imagine how much money he's made since then. This is a huge article, but to kind of sum it up for you, Neil has been working in digital advertising online since the late 90s, like since the birth of digital advertising existed. He worked for a company called DoubleClick, and then they got acquired in 2007 by Google. And one summation that this article gave of Neil's role at the time was he creates products that provide end-to-end solutions for digital advertisers, which to me just sounds like a bunch of corporate mumbo jumbo speak, but basically he's super hands-on with software and people and digital advertising. This guy thinks about making money on the internet and comes up with solutions to help do that, and he's really, really good at it. One thing that he started doing under Google that they gave him the money to do was to acquire companies. So he would go out and find companies that were making products that Google needed to expand their digital advertising reach, and he would go acquire those companies. So He's not just a guy that makes software, he also does a lot of business stuff. He has an MBA from Stanford. He's extremely accredited. But what is he actually like? Outside of his resume, what is he actually like? That was the next thing I really wanted to know. One part of this article is called How Does a $100 Million Googler Work? And there's some quotes from people that worked with and for Neil during his time at DoubleClick and Google. So it says, so what are some of Neil Mohan's secrets? How does he work? What can the rest of us learn from a guy whom Google is paying $100 million? We asked current and former colleagues and clients about his management style, and this is what we learned. From current and former direct reports, he's not a screamer or a big table banger. You don't waste a lot of time in meetings with Neil, that's for sure. If I escalate something to him, I know that he will return a response. He gives you a lot of autonomy, but believes in defining big, specific, and strategic goals. Every 3 months, he makes sure there is not a lot of redundancy in his product line, which is critical because in ad tech, everything has to sync. He doesn't bullshit. If our numbers were going bad, I heard it from him. I never had to talk to him unless I needed to. It was awesome. This might sound weird to some people as like a weird comment to make, but if you're working in the corporate world and you have a boss that likes to have way too many meetings, everybody who's been in that situation knows exactly what this person is talking about. Not having to talk to someone at work unless you need to is a massive freedom. And it sounds like he is big on autonomy and just letting smart and talented people do their jobs, which sounds like such a basic thing. But there are a lot of like leaders and executives, especially in the tech world, who don't do that. So from what I'm reading here, it sounds like Neil is pretty good at his job and pretty good at leading people, which is reassuring. The next thing I wondered was, okay, if he's going to be the CEO of YouTube, he's not just over products and policy. So I wonder what Neil thinks about censorship on YouTube. Neil spoke at Vidcon in 2019. So let's take a look at a clip from that next.
As you've hopefully heard me say before, as well as our CEO Susan and other YouTube leaders, responsibility is our #1 priority. This means protecting YouTube from bad actors seeking to exploit our community while preserving the positive impact of an open platform where anyone can share their voice with the world. We're removing more harmful content, raising up authoritative voices, reducing recommendations of borderline content, and rewarding trusted creators like those of you in this room today.
Now, the first time I listened to this talk, I almost missed what he just said there. It doesn't sound like a big deal because he just kind of says it kind of nonchalantly, but my ears kind of perked up when I heard it. But what he just said has huge implications for how search and discovery and the algorithm on YouTube works. Basically, he says that they're raising up authoritative voices, which that could mean anything. I'd be really curious if I got to talk with him. What do you mean by authoritative voices? In a lot of cases, that means like a trusted channel, someone that you've verified. But immediately my mind goes to like, you're just going to boost channels that say what you want them to say. That's like the cynical half of my brain. But I'm willing to listen and to kind of give him a chance on this because I'm curious what he means by that. I'd also be really curious to ask him what he means by borderline content. Borderline of what? What are we on the border of? I'm just very interested in the type of content that YouTube is interested in de-emphasizing versus the type of content that they're interested in boosting. Who are these authoritative channels? Why are they authoritative? It doesn't sound like a big deal the way he says it, but he is fundamentally describing massive changes to YouTube's algorithms if this has already been implemented, which this is from 2019. This is 4 years ago. So what he's talking about is probably already in place.
But we're making good progress on this really hard challenge. Just a few weeks ago, for example, we updated our hate speech policy because this content has no place on our platform. And later this year, we'll be updating our approach to harassment, particularly creator-on-creator harassment. This work is just as critical to the future of the YouTube community as any product launch.
In 2019, YouTube did roll out a new set of creator-on-creator harassment policies and guidelines that basically made people terrified to even criticize each other. I think that was a little bit overblown because obviously people are allowed to criticize each other now on YouTube, but they did kind of draw some lines in the sand that said, you can't criticize someone based on their physical traits and things that they can't change about themselves. But on the flip side, I do understand that they have to work with advertisers. And Neil, from everything I've seen and read of him, seems like a very monetization-minded guy, which I like that. I want somebody at YouTube who's the CEO who's thinking about more ways to make me money. And that's Neil. Neil is the money guy. He's on that Sigma grind set. He's all about them dollar bills. When people ask him about products he's proud of, he talks about channel memberships, new ways for YouTubers to make money. You can join kind of like a Twitch subscription. You can throw money every month at a YouTuber and join their channel and get perks. That was Neil. That was created under his direction. Super chats. So all these like new ways that they've monetized, especially using streaming and gaming, those are all things that were created under Neil. So I do think that this kind of policy stuff aside that I'm a little curious about, I do think a lot of the products that have come up underneath Neil have been really good. And that leads us into the next point that a lot of people have been bringing up today, is that he said some positive things about crypto and NFTs, and that has a lot of people very much on edge. So let's look at specifically what he has said about those things. In this article from The Verge, the journalist here talked with Neil, and this is from February of 2022, so this is about 1 year old. So pretty up-to-date information, and they ask him about all kinds of different monetization strategies and where YouTube is going with NFTs and crypto. And I thought his answers were pretty interesting. So let's give it a listen.
So there's the metaverse, which I would say is like lightly controversial in the sense of, is it going to happen? Is like a good question, right? It's a long way to go before we spend our days in headsets in the full metaverse. And next to that, and I think intertwined with it, maybe unfairly, is blockchain, NFT, crypto stuff. There has been some small announcements, again, from Susan. Hey, we're going to think about doing this for creators. When you think about NFTs and creators, there's a lot of activity there. That's way more loaded. That's way more controversial. It is, I would say, an ideological war in the tech community, whether NFTs and the blockchain and crypto are going to pan out or whether they're good. You're very focused on creators. Is that something you're going to head into?
Yeah. So the first thing that I'll say up top is that, I'm by no means an expert on that technology. There's obviously lots of people who've spent a lot of time thinking about it. As you described, there's an active conversation in our industry around all of these things.
Active conversation's good.
But you kind of hit on the first point I was going to make, which is for us, it all starts, and Susan pointed this out, in her letter as well. It all starts with our creators, just like I said, again, at the beginning as it relates to our mission. And so there is a connection between the evolution of that technology, particularly in the manifestation like NFTs, and creators. You've seen that already happen outside of YouTube, whether it's musicians looking for ways to crowdsource their next piece of creative content, whether it's a song or what have you, and allow fans to be able to partake in that, be able to bundle in things like things in the real physical world around meet and greets and things like that. And so that's already happening. And just like we've built other products, like, we built our merchandising shelf on YouTube because creators were selling lots of merch on YouTube and we wanted to make it easier for them. So we are very attuned to what our creators are thinking about and doing. And so that is sort of one lens at which we come at this. The second is, are there capabilities that, this new technology, kind of some of these new paradigms might afford that we couldn't do otherwise? So is there something, for example, to this idea of potentially crowdsourcing the development of content? That is what happens. That's what happens on YouTube. Today, the model on YouTube is you build a video, you build an audience, and then you monetize it. Are there ways that we could continue to foster that creative process by having some of that risk taken away up front? But as a result of that risk being taken away up front, your fans and viewers can partake in the upside of it, as an example. Or you could potentially continue to participate in the upside of it as a creator, even if that piece of content continues to kind of get sold repeatedly in the future. And so those are concepts that don't exist today, that I think could be enabled by some of this new technology. And that's sort of what I was referring to in my letter. I think that's sort of what Susan was referring to. I don't have a concrete feature or a product proposal to talk about today, but that is the lens through which we're thinking about how something like, blockchains and particularly NFT manifestations of it could show up on YouTube.
So I actually really liked his answer there. His answer was two parts. The way I understood it is, it sounds like they're really just listening to YouTubers and seeing how they want to use NFTs, if at all. And secondly, I really liked what he talked about with crowdfunding. That's actually been something that Mr. Beast has talked about. So an example would be, let's say Mr. Beast wants to shoot a video, but it's going to cost $20 million for him to shoot the video. He could sell NFTs. Stay with me. I cringe even saying that sentence. He could sell NFTs. He could sell NFTs, and each NFT could be like 0.001% of the video's equity. You could buy shares in the video. You're helping fund that video up front. You're technically taking a risk, but when the video comes out, you would then get a share of the profits for however long the contract specified, and that could all be managed through an NFT. So that's kind of one of the things that Neil is talking about, and I do think that that would be a really cool use. And the other thing I really liked about his answer was that he didn't give like a tech bro answer, which is kind of what I was expecting. I don't know why. I guess just because he's been in Silicon Valley forever, but he didn't say like, oh, dude, NFTs are the future, bro. We're going to make so much fucking money. Like, that wasn't the answer. He gave a very level-headed, thoughtful answer. And also keep in mind that this interview took place before Logan Paul's whole thing was kind of exposed by CoffeeZilla, which I think has got to be the most visible, high-profile NFT scandal that's happened in a long time. I would be curious to hear Neil's updated thoughts on this. I'm curious if the last year might have changed his perspective at all. And look, I do think that in some ways cryptocurrency is going to be the future, but any of you that have watched me for any amount of time have probably heard me say some very anti-crypto, anti-NFT things. Just the term NFT now has a lot of bad connotations. So I think if they're going to do something like this, they're going to have to rename it. They're going to have to call it something else. Like literally, they're just going to have to rename the technology if they're going to use it. That's my take. That's my thoughts on it. Now, one other really interesting thing happened while Neil was head of products. The dislike counter got removed from YouTube, which is one thing that I'm still a little salty about. So I went and found a podcast he did called the Lew Later podcast, which another one I'll link in the description. And they asked him about the dislike counter being removed. And I thought his answer was pretty interesting.
I don't know if it's the removal of a feature, if it's a new feature, but of course I'm talking about this dislike button situation. And I've been following a little bit on, I mean, obviously I saw the original release, but then I've seen some of the feedback from creators that are in my circle a little bit. Maybe you can give me like a brief background on that particular decision, the removal of the dislike button, and sort of YouTube's position on why this was an important thing to do.
Yeah. And so
before we go on, can I just say, dang, Neil keeping it fresh with the Arcturix. He is really fresh.
There was a lot of thought that went into it. In fact, we ran a couple of experiments ahead of time to actually gather some data and learn, the impact of dislike counts on the ecosystem. What was the impact on creators, on viewers, etc. And we learned a couple of things. One is that if you do remove the number right next to the actual dislike the button per se, it does remove some of the incentive for the behavior of people swarming and sort of, the disliking a particular video as a swarm activity as opposed to sort of an individual action. So that was one key learning.
That to me seems really obvious. Like maybe it wasn't obvious at the time. If you remove the counter, like people are going to be less incentivized to click the button. If I click a button and I don't see anything happen, then next time I think about clicking that button, I'm going to go, well, nothing happened last time I clicked it. Why would I click it? And I don't like the idea of kind of limiting the feedback options publicly viewable to just positive feedback options. Like, because that's just not, it just feels dishonest to me. Like the world isn't all likes. Sometimes in this life, you're going to get some dislikes and that's okay. But if you can't deal with that, YouTube sheltering you from seeing the dislikes is not going to make you any better or any better at receiving criticism. It's not going to make your life any better. I do fundamentally disagree with this decision, but let's hear him out. He has one other reason.
The second was we also learned that the types of videos or the type of content that was particularly prone to that type of an attack, dislike attack, if you will, were smaller creators that were up and coming, creators that didn't have sort of some of the infrastructure that other larger creators had. And so those were two key insights that we had.
So that's another interesting point. He says that people getting dislike bombed were smaller creators, which to me, when I think of highly disliked videos, like I know the most disliked video of all time at one point may still be was YouTube Rewind from one of the recent years before they stopped doing the rewinds. And so people immediately, when they removed the dislike counter, thought, oh, well, you guys just did that because people dislike bombed the YouTube Rewind. I do think it's interesting that he mentions smaller creators. The only reason I could think of that, well, I could think of two reasons that that might have been happening is, for one, I guess if you're a smaller creator and you make a video like attacking a huge YouTuber, like if I was some kid that just came onto YouTube and I made a video just like attacking Dream, I was like, I hate Dream, I could definitely see myself just like swarmed with a dislike attack. The other type of YouTube channel that's small that I could see getting dislike swarmed is somebody doing tutorials. So everybody's had this experience where you're watching a tutorial, maybe you're trying to see like how to change a tire on your specific model of car, or you're trying to see how to do something in Photoshop, and someone does a tutorial video that you find and you click on, and it's like 12 and a half minutes long. They don't give the right answer, or they give some answer that technically works, but it's like 15 steps longer than it needs to be. People would just dislike the video, and as soon as you pull it up and you see that it has 9 million dislikes and 12 likes, you're like, oh, this isn't the right tutorial for me. I'm going to go back to my search and find a better tutorial for what I was looking for. Them taking that away, I think, is a huge loss because it was such an easy signal for me as a viewer. But there are cases where it's good. Like, it's actually helpful for people to see a lot of dislikes on a video because it kind of makes you stop and think like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with this. And a lot of times there is something wrong with it if there's a ton of dislikes, but we lost that. It's gone. So Neil then tweeted, "Thank you, Susan Wojcicki. It's been amazing to work with you over the years. You've built YouTube into an extraordinary home for creators and viewers. I'm excited to continue this awesome and important mission. Looking forward to what lies ahead." So overall, I'm curious to see what's going to happen next. I think I'm definitely not all doom and gloom. I don't think Neil is going to be bad for YouTube, and I'm actually really confident that he's going to be great for YouTube because he's obviously made some great product decisions that are great for monetization, and it seems like he really does think about YouTubers first and figuring out ways that we can make more money, which I love that. And if you're somebody who's thinking about being a YouTuber or you want to make YouTube videos one day, you should love that too. You should love somebody who's looking for new ways that you can make your passion into a career. And when people are working on monetization tools, that's exactly what's happening. Let me know what you guys think about Neil in the comments below. And if you haven't seen it yet, you can check out my video that I mentioned about Logan Paul right here. Thanks for watching. Stay weird, internet. See you guys next time. Peace.